Live with Littledata. Today, we're going to be talking all about cookies. These kind of cookies. This is a chocolate chip one from a brand called Cutter and Squidge, a good shop by brand in London. And we're going to be talking about some kind of web-based cookies as well. So not just the kind you eat.
Yeah, and then before we started, my name's Ross. By the way, I'm from Littledata Web Analytics Expert. So Ed asked me about do I have mine cookies, and basically they're all here. So I was kind of waiting and nervous a little bit, so didn't prepare too many, like 8 or 9 or something like that. I mean, obviously it could be many for some, but
Wow, it was a long bit of prep. You got through 8 cookies. What's your favorite kind of cookie, Ross?
I actually made some with my kids the other day. Hey, what's up, yeah? They were actually chipped with M&Ms. But it turned out that M&Ms, you gotta put the right timing, because if you put them too early, they kind of
Melt.
drawn into the pastry. So it's kind of demanding some expertise. The
Yeah,
same way the cookies do. And your ones, which ones do you prefer?
yeah. I think I'm a chocolate chip fan, definitely. But
Okay,
M&M ones sound good. I'm going to try that as an upgrade.
actually, when they bake, M&Ms kind of become, you know, not what we're used to with M&Ms, but they're cool. Otherwise, we I was actually looking through the sources and the content that's available on this topic, and I would say it kind of goes two ways. It's usually some geeks gather around this topic, and they have deep understanding of the subject matter, but they actually disregard the fact that audience does not have such a deep understanding. So from scratch, they start talking about creating a proxy server, and then creating faking the cookie through HTTP response from server, and etc. So kind of, I think they lose interest from the general public really soon.
Yep.
And then there's the other also type of content that kind of goes on my nerves even further. This is actually content creators who very well know, and I would dare to say abuse the fact that people don't understand the topic. So they start, they draw a rocket ship or like a spaceship, and they say, let's prepare for the cookieless future. And I think they gotta, they get a buy-in right away.
I agree. So that's exactly why I picked this topic this week about cookies, because I think there's a lot of falsehood spread. A lot of people talking about, as you say, world without cookies, or some sort of apocalypse or such things. And
Cookie apocalypse,
um,
yeah.
the kind of reality is important, but a little less dramatic. Um, so I wrote a post about this a few weeks ago, and yeah, tried to unpack what I saw as the sort of the truth about cookies. But let's start with kind of an overview, because for our listeners, about what are we talking about here. So when when um, when someone visits your website, let's think about it from an analytics perspective and tracking perspective. So someone visits your website, um, and then maybe they look at a second page of the website. The first very basic thing you need to know is that those two page views, those two hits, are from the same person. Now that's actually not trivial, because from the web server point of view, they're just pages sent off into the internet. They're not like, there's nothing unique about a user there. So the very first basic use of cookies is a session cookie, just to basically tell the analytics software, Google Analytics, let's say, that the page view is from the same user, the same session. Google Analytics doesn't want to know who you are. In fact, it takes great pains to make sure that it is anonymous and it can't sort of track you as an individual. But in order for the stats to make sense, the web owner, or the analyst looking at the data, needs to know that these hits were from the same person. So it's got a first basic thing. A cookie is just a short bit of text, typically a single identifier in this case, that can be used by obviously by the web application, but also by third-party scripts. Again, typically in this case, an analytics script to work out same person, right? So so far so good. And then the second kind of use for these third-party cookies, first-party cookies analytics is to track the user across multiple sessions. So I come and visit your website today. but you kind of want to know if I come back and buy tomorrow, am I the same person? Because most people don't just click on a site and purchase in the same journey. It's not a sort of single session experience. So we need to be able to understand as a property owner, again, without compromising the user's anonymity, that's the same person. So we have a cookie, a user cookie that stores something that lasts, maybe up to 2 years. In many cases, a lot less. That allows us to do it between sessions. So is that fair, Ross? More to add on?
Makes sense, 100%. And I love actually the fact that you explained how even the session wouldn't be tracked right without using the cookies. So while preparing for this, and actually there are quite a few analytics solutions out there that advertise about being, let's ditch Google Analytics and start doing cookieless tracking. And the graphs and the tables look pretty similar to what Google Analytics is offering. But when you dig under the hood, I was quite surprised that they had to announce to the users that because they are cookieless, there is no way to tie one session to another, even if it comes from a same browser device pair, in a stretch of a couple of days, which is basically what people don't probably remember the days when you were going through the logs and basically you see all these hits, and then you can, if it's a super small and a low traffic website, you could tie these to one another and understand what an individual or like small cohorts of people are doing. But the moment it kind of gets traction, it's totally impossible from looking from this huge amounts of letters to understand what's happening. And this is exactly what these new tools who advertise them as cookieless are. Just like a pretty log, a log that's turned into a graph, but without any attribution whatsoever. Because if I visited obviously yesterday via Google ad and then came back today directly, even in such a simple buyer journey, which doesn't exist, I believe, today, with the 2 points of contact, like one ad and another direct, you won't be able to track. So
right, and I absolutely. So it's like analytics back to the Stone Age. I mean, I'm old enough to remember Web Trends, which which was the sort of before Google Analytics sort of 2007 launch, was basically just analysis of server logs, as you say. So that the hits were literally just that. All you knew is that someone had requested something, but you didn't even know it was a real person. Frankly, it could just be a bot or whatever. And I actually think that's another point here in the modern world, like going back to analyzing server logs in a world in which the vast majority of web traffic is not actually people, they're just bots, is kind of meaningless. I mean, what does it mean that the page has been requested from your server? It doesn't mean someone's read it, and it doesn't mean someone's engaged with it. So I think you're right. And also the thing I found, like digging in some of the solutions claiming they're cookieless, is that they're not. Underneath it, they still talk about user identifiers. They're still using I mean, maybe they're technically using something like a local storage, or it's not technically a cookie, but it's the same thing. It's a little bit of text that's stored in the browser.
Actually, it's even more, I would say, kind of convoluted, because, for example, if you look at how the IP intelligent tracking prevention, what is it, from Safari, they are way more harsh about the data that's being stored in the local storage versus the cookies. Like with the cookies, they're like, okay, let's leave you 7 days that is going to last. And whatever you keep in local storage, exactly because of maybe you might be advertising yourself as a non-cookie user, we're going to destroy it in 24 hours, no matter what. So, don't try to fool actually user that you're a cookieless, user with a obviously Safari on their device, because we're going to, be super harsh about it.
So exactly that's my view, is that cookies are necessary. People who try and bypass them, it's either not a long-lived solution, as in it's some loophole that will be closed, or, as you say, it's not a useful solution in the sense that you're not actually able to attribute all the different touch points together.
I have a question that I would like to hear your opinion about. So imagine if, I don't know, privacy, government agencies, they actually go all in on cookies. So big tech giants are actually obliged to kill the cookie. How do you think that, like, would Google, or for example Apple, Apple provides the device itself. I would say, Google provides the Android, which is like the Chrome or whatever, how deeper they can go into the tracking. Would they still be able to actually, I wouldn't say track individual people, because they obviously don't want to have anything to do with individual tracking, but would they still be able to? And if you remember the Flock, which was a Google's kind of announced, way of dealing with this cookieless world, so to speak. Do you agree that they would still have the ability to actually compile these aggregations of people and pools of similar people who behave in a similar way? Or what's your opinion?
Yeah, well, so as far as I'm aware, there's two basic ways that you might be able to link together a user journey not using cookies or not using local storage, anything cookie-like, any browser-based identifier. The first one is fingerprinting. This idea has been around for 20 years or so. And it basically is the idea that you in your like setup of your computer, your browser is very unique. All of the kind of versions of the different tools you've got on there, exactly the different settings you've got enabled. And so if the tracking script can basically suck all those up, store them, and then next time you visit, it can reference back, and based off that and a bit of your IP address, they can probably figure out whether you are or not the same person. Now, apparently, there's an even cleverer thing I was reading about that's now part of fingerprinting, which is based on. So basically, in a browser, you have a thing called a canvas element where you get the browser to draw a shape, and the speed at which it draws a shape and the exact outcome is very unique based on the browser processor and so on. So you can effectively fingerprint the actual chip that's running using the kind of graphic that's generated. So that, again, this is like a very, if you add that to the settings and the kind of script version stuff, you get, what's claimed to be like 90% of the time a user. But for me, there's two problems with fingerprinting. The first is that it's fundamentally incompatible, as you say, with it. So, hang on, back up a bit. Why do people want to kill cookies? Why are we talking about this cookieless world? So
it's a great actually thing that you want to. I think that I understand you probably saying that this is even worse in the privacy protection, because so it's like pointing at you.
Apple wants to, like Apple limits the cookies and so on with intelligent tracking prevention. They want to protect you, the user, from being tracked across sites that you didn't opt into that tracking, right? So fingerprinting is fundamentally undermining that, because you're basically, without your consent, they've been able to pull information like a fingerprint that you've left behind without realizing it. And so we do know people are using fingerprinting to kind of enhance their tracking. We don't do it in Littledata because I just think it's against the spirit of the agreement. And going back to the kind of like, what do the big tech do about this? I don't think they want to encourage fingerprinting, and I think they may well be pressure on the likes of Google to restrict it. Like they could restrict it. They could basically not allow a third-party script to access that kind of information. Or for example, with the canvas elements, they could put some randomization into it, which meant that it was, it wasn't a perfect sort of match for your processor each time. So that's the first problem with fingerprinting, not going against the whole spirit of privacy. And then the second problem is it's not actually that it's not really better than using cookies. I mean, what we found is that if you get it right, and getting it right is hard, setting the cookie the right time and the tracking script running properly, in a modern scenario, that still links together, more than 90% of sessions, 95% of sessions. Fingerprinting does about the same. So it's not a sort of magic bullet that's going to suddenly give you 100% attribution. So yeah, I personally think for me it's in that bucket of like short-lived workarounds. Yeah, I know it works now, but going back to your question, is it in Google's interest to do it? No. And then, sorry, just a long answer to the question, but the second part of it, Google and Meta have another way that they can identify you, and that's via the actual accounts that you have with them. So those two companies have big enough global device graphs to kind of know that your computer is logged into Gmail or your computer is logged into Facebook, and therefore you must be the same person. So effectively, they can, and Meta's been a lot more, let's say, proactive in doing this than Google. They can use that device graph to link together, page views or whatever on across different sessions.
But don't you think that, like, when you compare, okay, people obviously, there are these three big players, Apple, Google, and Meta.
Yeah.
While Apple is making the devices and like they are super slick and everything is closed source, and you cannot make a mistake in there. Google is kind of more open, so you can actually install Android on any piece of crappy device that you get your hands on. But Meta was just a website, and from the I have some background in development, so when you think about how they actually hacked the system, okay,
Yeah.
we have this nice website where people put their pictures from their seaside and
Yeah.
stuff, but then we're gonna give some piece of code for the small business owners to put on their websites, so they understand when Ed comes today and comes back tomorrow, and Ross the same. But behind the scenes, we're actually gonna collect all these interests about Ed with just this little piece of code on our website. We don't have a device, we don't have operating system, we don't have a browser, we don't have like kernel for the like Android is for the smartphones. So they basically, I think that, and when you look at their growth, like Meta's growth in ad spend, or the income from ad spend, it's been crazy. I think that like these people who actually produce either software as Google or hardware from that's Apple, they were kind of banging their heads, and they're like, these guys who just made a website, he kind of entered everybody's yard and understanding what people are doing without producing just coding. So
Well, they're very clever, but also that there's sort of, you mentioned a really important point there, which is about what are these tech giants actually trying to do. And as you say, Meta's hugely reliant on advertising as their income source. Same with Google. So Apple's the odd one out in the sense that it doesn't, although Apple has a growing app advertising business. I think they're actually number 4 globally now for kind of advertising spend online. But still, it's a very much closed wall in their app store. It's they don't have there's no their incentive is to remove the ability to retarget ads and track users. The other two, they're very reliant on advertising, and that's why we haven't seen, even though the internet browser market is now a bit of a duopoly. Internet Explorer obviously died off a cliff. There's a few also ones, but it's basically a duopoly between Safari and Chrome, and so what's happening is Safari's and WebKit generally, Apple's sort of browser kit for their devices, is very tough on cookies, blocking and limiting them while they can, whereas Chrome is not, and doesn't in fact even limit third-party cookies at the moment. So Apple's been under some pressure for Google's been under some pressure for a few years to sort of follow that, but they say they'll roll out blocking for third-party cookies in 2024, not the kind that would be used by Google Analytics. But again, is there a commercial imperative to do that? Not really, because that will reduce the ability for their kind of ad networks.
What's surprising now when you mentioned the duopoly with about the browser market, when this iOS 14.5 update came out, and when iPhone users were prompted to answer this question, obvious, like, would you like this application to share data with others? Okay, nobody wants that. I was expecting Facebook to go all into creating or acquiring a browser, kind of to keep people in their own space. Whereas, I don't know, Zuckerberg went crazy with this metaverse, whatever.
Yeah.
He placed his bets on that. I don't know how they came out. People say who are into that it didn't came out that successful. But how come he didn't see kind of like buy a browser, man, and kind of try to push people wherever because obviously I think that a lot of people actually use internet, like they go start on, I don't know, Facebook, Instagram. If they go outside of that realm for pressing a commercial, they have to use another browser, which is where Mark loses the track of those visits. It was super obvious. I don't know if he's watching this LinkedIn live, but if he is, it's still
Not
not late,
need for the browser. Yeah,
What?
I sort of, I guess have views on that, but without meandering too much off the topic. I just want to mention for those of
Okay.
you listening that you can please feel free to ask us any questions in the chat, and we'll
Okay.
happily answer those as we go along. Yeah. So okay. So back to cookies. I just wanted, for those of you perhaps who are a bit lost about what we're talking about, I also had a little a little screen share I can show you. So just got this sort of diagram to explain kind of why, particularly why does Littledata use cookies? Why does it need cookies? So the typical problem with web browsing is that you as we talked about, you have multiple sessions. So think of these three things as kind of like, we're on the Shopify store, we're visiting, but there's basically the add to cart and purchase doesn't happen until the third time, right? So the user's kind of just discovering your brand the first time. They're kind of researching the product the second time, and then they're like, right, I'm ready to buy. Now, if the cookie breaks, as it does in this diagram, because the tracking wasn't set up properly, because Safari kills it, because the user's using ad blocker, various things, then your ability to link that add to cart and in fact purchase back to the person you've the source of the first visit is broken. So that kind of you're looking at Google Analytics, you're looking at the sort of first user, first source, or first channel. It's not going to be informative, because without that cookie, we simply can't look back, and we can't link together this custom journey that's happening over 30 days. So that's the reason why cookies are so important. So kind of with Littledata and what we do with linking together the client and the server side tracking, the idea is that you can link this into a journey, and also use retargeting to bring that user back in and know that they've been brought back in. So this isn't just about measurement. This is also about actually being able to retarget and drive the user back. And then obviously fundamentally what you're able to do here is link the whole journey together and link the sale that happens in the end with the visit at the front. So as I said, that's all due to cookies. Yes, you're right, there could be a web browsing experience without that, but an analytics experience without that, but it would be pretty limited. It would look a bit like this. You just have these three separate events. You'd know that a certain number of people have added to cart. You'd no idea who they were and why they did that.
Yeah, it's a more brute force approach to marketing analytics, without actually being able to put them all together into one meaningful insight, versus just counting numbers and trying to pull something out of them.
Got Blake kind of saying that you're on a first name basis with Mark. So
well, yeah, I introduced him with his full full name. So yeah.
Awesome. So Ross, what's your kind of view then, if the world of cookies is not exactly going away, and we can't do without them, what is as a sort of concerned web owner, what should we be worried about with cookies? What do you see coming up that might either limit the ability to use them, or kind of make them more useful?
Right now, when like people who advocate cookieless analytics right now, they are like, when you go and kind of explore the documentation and the tools, I think they're more like activists. There are even words you wouldn't believe. There are words like, we are against surveillance capitalism, which is why we don't want cookies, for example. So it's not, but when you think about it from the business perspective, so okay, there's a strategy, like a high level document, or vision, where does the business go, which can yield an investment. Where do we put our money? So investment wants return, and to measure the return, at least in the e-commerce realm, you need a cookie. I mean, or a business needs a cookie. So
yeah,
it's kind of super hard. Obviously, yeah, you can have some kind of an estimates where the wind blows, but without it, like, the results are, I don't know, I don't want to like throw numbers, but 10x, 20x lower or worse, which is why I don't see it going away anytime soon. It's okay to that. Actually, if anybody is willing to dig deeper, the first thing where I would go is like the intelligent tracking prevention from Safari, which is, I would say, the pinnacle of where the privacy protection is going. So it's kind of shortening the lifespan of the cookie, or restricting some gray area methods, which are you approach a cookie that was written for one domain from another one, and track people all across the website, all across internet, wherever they go. But for the purposes of a single brand, they're probably not going to. And cookie itself, as a first-party cookie, is never going to die. So people should know that. And zero-party data doesn't exist. Like, there is a first party that's like the owner of the website, and the second party is a visitor. So that's kind of should be clear. And the third party is somebody who's eavesdropping at the conversation. But basically, if these people who are eavesdropping and saying, okay, we're not going to particularly say that it's Ed and Ross, but these are kind of these two guys from their company, and there are like thousands of people who are like them. They want to buy, I don't know, some beers on the Friday evening. Let's hit them with that commercial. We're not going to invade their privacy. Either way, we're going to have beers after this, on a Friday evening. So they're not far away from what we already know. So.
Yeah, I think it's a really important point you made there is about the fact that Apple it's not trying to get rid of first-party cookies.
Yep.
Apple believes, their web privacy team believes that, there's a legitimate reason to track a user. It's just, unfortunately, they pick a fairly arbitrary cutoff of 7 days of the lifespan of that cookie. So to the extent that limits you as a brand really depends on how high consideration of product you are. I've worked with for example, I think at the one end of the extreme kind of furniture brands, for example. So furniture tends to be a very long cycle of consideration because you maybe see an ad for the new couch, but then you've got to take it back, chat to the wife about it, measure up the lounge. It's a whole process. You can't just buy it. And so that they tend to be most affected by the kind of 7-day expiry because it's highly likely that that the purchase happens more than 7 days after the first visit, and so the first visit and the purchase are not linked together. Equally, if you have a more kind of impulse purchase type product, whether it's food or maybe fast fashion, 7 days may not be so limiting. But I think for a lot of brands it is limiting. So as I said, the challenge is just really. But I don't see Apple roaring back from this. I don't think they're gonna somehow
from a website owner perspective. I think the challenge would be for them to make as a low of a threshold for a micro conversion, like a super, I don't know, whatever micro conversion could be, like and then try to segment these audiences, even if it's like something super simple as a scroll, or like a click on a button, or like pressing a play on a video that's like on a hero, just to capture some kind of understanding which traffic actually converts better, even though this conversion is obviously, worthless in terms of money, but some kind of a to have some kind of a distinction between completely worthless and unengaged traffic compared to somebody who is actually, in case of furniture, for example, like a gallery, open a gallery, that's enough of a conversion to actually understand and attribute the value to some traffic versus the other one, which is kind of not making any money.
Also, maybe it's not completely worthless. So for example, let's say you're kind of mid funnel. So what you're saying is pick a mid funnel goal, and it might be something like a user viewing a product details page, or saving it to wish list or something like that. If you know that on average, based on the aggregate stats, average people review a product details page, 10% of them will buy, then it doesn't, do you know what I mean? You don't need to know the user journey for each user. You just know that as long as you can get certain campaigns getting them to that page, you basically got a 1 in 10 chance of selling to them. So you can take your average, order value. You can just say, look, on average, it's worth 10% of that. So I think it is possible to do that. And that's a really good suggestion, that you don't need to, it's useful to know the full customer journey for some of your customers, but for those that are kind of where the journey's broken, you can pick a proxy.
Have smaller identifiers of the quality traffic versus the one that is not so good, so to speak.
A Littledata actually, we actually do that ourselves internally, because we have a hard time with Shopify's App Store of telling people who come before the App Store and engage with our marketing and understand our product, and after the App Store, And so again, we do something similar where we pick on a metric where we just know a certain number of people have engaged, and then even
like a proxy. Okay.
yeah, we can't track them exactly the same thing. Then we at least know that on average, a certain number of those are going to get to subscribe. Jazz has just raised a good little point that actually, if you want to go deeper into this, we have both a blog post about the truth about cookies and also a whole ebook on a world without cookies. So feel free to look those up on our blog. I feel, Ross, before we wrap it up, we should probably just talk a little bit about Google and consent mode, because this is you mentioned another really important point there, which is that it's you can sort of model the gaps, but if you didn't have any idea of what the typical user journey, there'd be no sort of gaps to fill in. So yeah, I mean, what do you understand about Google consent mode, and do you see it sort of, I guess what I'm saying is that I think it solves a problem, but only if you do have some non-model data. Only if you have some actual data.
Yeah. Well, you have to have some, but I think it comes from the internal teams and from understanding the journey from, people who would be actually better at pinpointing what's the problem without analytics, because they just have the experience with the product itself or the service or anything. And filling these gaps is actually I would say, the future of where this cookieless world that we all fear is actually going. Because as you said, you're going to have to some extent but you cannot model if you don't have like you have one color and kind of have to draw a rainbow. I don't know if it's possible.
Yeah, the rainbow is a good analogy. Like the point about consent mode is that Google understands some people want to opt out of being tracked. By the way, that's another reason why one of the problems with linking together user journeys is that some people are saying, hey, particularly in Europe and increasingly in various US states, you have the right to opt out of being tracked. And so what they say is, okay, we'll anonymize your data, but we can fill in the gaps. But as you say, like if we have all the other colors in the rainbow, we'll have red, green, blue, whatever, we can fill in yellow. Like that's okay. If we have like 80% of it, we can fill in 20%. But as you say, if you haven't got any colors, it's a good analogy. Like there's nothing to fill in.
Hey, before we wrap it up, I just want to mention that while looking here and there before this, there was this funniest consent mode, like a pop-up that says, if you don't want to accept cookies, you better stop browsing this website right now. That's what like the brand said. They're like super open about it. Just walk away if you don't want, because it's we are living off of that. So let's not pretend that like everybody, and even it's like some tech company, I think that they can afford to joke about that, because like a super B2B and people are not there just tar kicking.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I think e-commerce is a bit different, isn't it? Because I think with e-commerce, you do want the advertising is not your primary business. So even if people want to opt out, you'd prefer them to stay.
Absolutely. Yeah.
I think it takes quite a ballsy e-commerce brand to say, go away.
Yeah, if you don't want to be tracked. Cool.
Well, Ross, thank you very much. I think it's all we got time.
Thank you. Yeah, it was awesome discussing about this.
I hope you have a nice weekend, and thanks everyone for listening. And we'll be back again same time next week, and we'll be talking a little bit more about Google Analytics and how to create a drill down in about the channel groupings. It's a feature that people are really missing from Universal Analytics. I'm going to talk a few workarounds that we can do that in GA4.
Perfect. Thank you. Don't forget the beers. Bye-bye.
Have a nice weekend. Bye.